Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm thrilled to welcome Ryan McQuade to the podcast today to talk about the discreet charm of the Bourgeoisie, the Academy Award winner, Best Foreign Film of 1972. How are we doing, Ryan?
I'm doing wonderful, Brian. This is wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. It's like for the listeners out there, we were like talking for like 45 minutes before we even got on to do this. Like this is like the first time because you write for InSession Film,
right?
And I'm one of your editors, and like this is the first time we've actually got to talk
right
to each other outside of all us. Like, hey, your edits are in, so
edits ready,
edits are ready. So like, oh, your post's up. Congratulations, you did a great job. Which for your listeners out there, Brian, one of the best writers we have over at InSession Film, and one of the best writers currently out there. Makes my writing look like chump change every time. So in depth, so great. Love your reviews, love your work, and I'm just so happy to be here.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. Thanks for So I published my first reviews for The Ice Road, starring Liam Neeson. The movie that we're still talking about to this day, right?
I mean, that won Best Picture, not Coda, right?
People don't know this. It's been a few months. Coda did not win Picture. It was The Ice Road. I think it was right at the end. There was some build-up.
It's like a back-to-back winner. Like it's actually won like the last 3 or 4 years. Yeah,
so
quite unprecedented.
That was June of 21. So yeah, it's been 14 months writing for InSession Film. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the best. I mean, we love the site. We love your work. We love everybody's work on there. Everybody does a great job. Shout out to Dave Giannini, also to editor-in-chief over there.
He's fantastic.
He's my number 2 in command over there, and I love that guy to death. And he along with JD Durant, who just celebrated a birthday and everything. Those guys, I mean, they're just, everybody's great, and yeah, our staff, just some of the best and most positive people, weirdly enough, too, on the internet. Like it really is very hard to find so many positive, great people to work at one place.
Oh yeah.
And for it all to work together, and everybody working together too, and making connections and friendships, and then you having guests on, or we having you on, and all these other things in between. So yeah, it's I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything from hiring all you guys, but it's a nice thing to know that everybody's there and sort of supporting each other, and great writing like yours.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I haven't really talked about it much on this podcast. Like, I do Film at 50 every week, and for InSession Film, I've been doing a monthly column, Film at 25. So I've been looking at films that came out in 1997. So if you're into this Film at 50 podcast, you might want to check some of those out at InSession Film. I've been trying to figure out what to do for August. I think I might do Excess Baggage, which I saw once when I was when I was young, and I can't remember much of it, but I have always loved Alicia Silverstone, so I might do that one.
That's always great when you like haven't seen a movie in like 20 years.
Yeah,
and
25 years.
25 years, and you're just like, I haven't seen this movie.
I have no memory of it.
I have no memory of it, but I know I've seen it, but I have no memory of it. That's like the greatest. Those are the greatest films, because then it's like you get to rewatch it again. You know what I mean? Like there's some movies this year where I'm just like, man, I wish everyone would shut up about them, so then I can like have that moment of maybe when I put it in the old Blu-ray, I can have that feeling again. But
I very much believe films change as you grow older, and you revisit a movie 10 years later or 20 years later. There's a different flavor, even if you love it both times, or you loved it the first time, didn't like it so much. Like, they do change with where you are in your life, and I find that interesting. Even though the film stays the same, we change, and so the viewing is a little different.
Oh, I think they changed like 6 months later. To be honest with you. No, I'm not even joking. I mean, like, I have a rule. When I started InSession Film, this is a real quick thing. I had a rule after my first year being there, where it's like, I'm not going to give anything from the current year in which I'm seeing these movies 5 stars on Letterboxd, because I walked out of 2018 with like 10, and I'm like, come on, I did not watch 10 perfect films this year. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, come on, Ryan. So what I do is I'll give as many 4.5 star films as I want, but it takes a year. 6 months to a year
Mm-hmm.
separation, rewatch, outside of a theater, outside of a festival, outside of all the pomp and circumstances, just me in the movie by myself, maybe at home, with other people,
Mm-hmm.
and just giving it a rewatch.
Right.
And if it holds up, if it's better, then I can bump it up. Or sometimes, and sadly enough, sometimes they move down. A lot of them move down, which is weird, but it just happens like that too. And then the ones that are the cream of the crop, they stay that way.
Yeah. So looking at films from 50 years ago, it's kind of a different circumstance because I was not alive to see these films when they came out. So I would say half or more of the films we talk about on this podcast, I am watching for the first time. So it's kind of like it's like my first vision of these movies. But as so many have said, if you've never seen it, doesn't matter how old it is, it's new to you. And that's what's so fun about looking at these films from the early 70s. So kind of to get us started here before we get into Discreet Charm, like kind of what's your relationship with films from the 70s? Is that a decade of cinema you enjoy?
Oh my God. Like the 1970s, like maybe the greatest, in my opinion, era in cinema's history, and how we've been sort of chasing it ever since.
That's a good way to put it.
Chasing the high of that, because like you go and just the way that movies were shot, movies were looked, the way that directors were taking risks and chances. And if you follow directors and their filmographies and of their time and what they were doing, I mean, like a classic like The Godfather, speaking of a film that's like 50 years old, that is a movie that we all love. It is considered by many, including myself, to be the greatest film ever made. Okay, it's my favorite film of all time.
Oh, cool.
And yet there's like the television series and the books and everything about how that whole thing was a giant, absolute pain in the ass for everyone. And yet we revere it so much because it is this classic. And so like you read about all this stuff that's the film history. I even look to the new HBO Max series from Ethan Hawke, The Last Movie Stars.
Oh, I love
watching Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward's careers in that time period too, and just seeing the type of films that were being made and the type of the directors that were doing it. And like what's so weird is like you could have a director make like 4 or 5 pictures and they're all like pretty good to great. And yet people don't remember them now. But then when you go back, you're like, oh, that person did that and that and that. And you're like, shit, they did a lot. And there are a lot of good stuff. And they were carried by great actors. And because you still had like the transition of old Hollywood, you had those actors still around. And then you had new Hollywood, you had new figures that were being brought up at this time too, and in the height of their powers are just about to be in their prime. So like the 70s is just like pure cinema, and then like the 80s really screwed the pooch. So I'm not really waiting for those film at 50s, because you're just gonna be like, there's good movies in there, but it's like that's what I think modern cinema, to me, in the blockbuster scale, is trying to get at. The franchisization, the glitz and the glamour, the all that stuff of the 80s, because then in the 90s it tries to go back and do some of like that's where the independent circuit of the tries to be back in the 70s. And now we live in a time where it's like, what are we doing? Like we're in such a weird space now that I look back at the 70s, I go, it may have been hard, but it seems like it was a hell of a lot simpler. It's the best era of Hollywood for me. And I know that it's like, oh, only 50 years, and like the 30s and the 40s were great too, but it's just like, come on, in the 50s and the 60s, it's like 70s rules. So
yeah, I don't know if we'll be doing this into the films of the 80s. That's a long time from now. Right now my goal is Jaws. Like that's the goal. Get to Jaws. That's summer of 75.
Get to Jaws. And then it's like figure it out from there.
And then we're starting the blockbuster mentality. And then I'm like, maybe not. But then 76 is an amazing year. So many good films from that year. So I'm like, maybe with least one more year.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's you go and because like Brian, you know this. When you're a kid, you go to like top 10 lists of years, or you go to what's nominated at the Oscars. to really get your gist of like, okay, what were the films from that year? And that's where my starting point is. And then I go and I branch out from there. Right. And the 70s is just like banger lineup after banger lineup after banger lineup for everything. And some just really like, wow, they picked that in a lineup of 5. Good for them. They had taste. And like now you're just like, it's a lineup of 10, and you're like,
you're trying to find a good
that got in there. And we're like debating what number 11 is. It's like, shouldn't we debate what was 7, 8, 9? Like,
yeah. So, I've always been I like the 5 for picture.
I missed the 5, but I mean,
it's not terrible, but I mean, because in the 30s and 40s they did some of the years where it was 10 nominees, like 1939 year of like Gone with the Wind, and that's 10 nominees, and it's 10 great films, and so that's
but it's very rare that all 10
today,
are great.
Today to get 10 movies worthy of Best Picture, I don't know.
I will say this: either 5 or 10. I don't like the sliding scale. I think the sliding scale is stupid. Like, you just either do 5 or 10, and I'm fine with 10 because it's like something like Drive My Car last year gets in.
Right. That's what's good about it.
It's like that gets in, and then you're like, okay, don't look up, whatever. But you're like, I got to drive my car, and then you know, it's a compromise, you know.
But the problem with it, I feel like there's 2 or 3 films that could feasibly win, and so it's kind of like you don't really need.
It's
10.
back to even like with 5, right? It comes down to 2 anyway.
Yeah.
You know? Like at a certain point, it's like you're number 10. You're just show up to the Oscar party and stuff your face with shrimp at that point, you know.
So, Discreet Charm. Had you seen this before?
You know, it's one of those where you own the Criterion and it sits on your shelf, and you just like, I really want to get to it because I believe this is one of like Michael Phillips, the great writer over at the Chicago Tribune. I think this is like one of his favorite films.
Oh, cool.
And so I'd always been like, man, I really don't want to let Michael Phillips down and never see this film. Somebody that I admire a lot.
Yeah, he's great.
So when you were like, hey, you want to come talk about the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie? And I was like, sure, it gives me that opportunity. So yeah, I'd never seen it.
Okay. Oh, cool. So this was your first watch. Very nice.
Yes.
So I spent summer abroad or semester abroad in Dusseldorf, Germany in 2005. And it was we had a history of European film class, and the guy showed all sorts of great stuff. This was the one that really kind of stuck with me. He showed us Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. It was my introduction to Louis Buñuel. And I remember in the years after, I sought out some of his other works, and of course, you know, his 2 early films that are very well known. But this is kind of like his most famous like late career movie, I would say. This is the one that more people have seen, and it is such an unusual, amazing little piece of work that I just, watching it again for the first time, I think, since I had seen it in 2005, I was just taken with it all over again. It's just a distinctly unique narrative that you rarely see now. It's of a modern film.
Yeah, watching this, it was like it was a whirlwind experience. I'll say that. I was like, almost had a headache, like just be trying to keep up with it. But I love that. No, I love that about movies. So like, that's not like a diss on the film. It's like sometimes you forget, because of modern sensibilities, what it's like to have to search, you know, for answers, or what it means, or what the filmmaker's trying to do, or where the film's trying to go, and your brain's trying to rattle like the scenarios. And I think like that's what I liked about it. I was just like, oh, I like a challenge, and I think it's I don't think it's too much of a challenge, but I think it like at times I was like, okay, where are we gonna go? Because like this thing ducks and it's like a boxing match, I think, at times too, with this little film. So
this movie is not a classic 3-act structure.
No, this is like we're gonna do whatever we want, and you're just gonna come along for the ride. You know what I mean?
I think I have a quote in my notes here somewhere where the director was like, oh yeah, if I felt like we needed an extra scene, I would just think back on the dream I had the night before, and we'd shoot that.
Damn, that's good. God, that's the kind of control you want. You know what I mean? This is what American directors can't get that foreign directors can, which is like the weird ass control to just be like, oh, we're doing an extra day. Why? Because I had a nap and I discovered a scene. you know?
Yeah, but I'm like, how many movies we follow this ensemble of characters into all sorts of different restaurants and things, and how many movies would stop and introduce a new character who walks over to the table, tells them a story, then we go into a flashback of that story with this person we've just met, 30-40 minutes into the movie, and then the flashback ends, he says thank you, he gets up, he walks away, we never see him again.
Also too, like the whole thing's being narrated while also the dialogue, and it's god damn it.
It's not something I would love in just any movie. I don't know what it is about the way that Buñuel treats it here. I like that it's like a surrealistic film, but in terms, it's more about the events. He's not like banging you over the head with like the camera work and like doing big crazy things with like the style of the movie itself. It's more of just like the events taking place, and you just, as you said, the word whirlwind, like you're never sure where it's going next, and that can be kind of fun sometimes when you're watching a movie and you have no idea what's going to happen in the next scene.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And it's like, I knew the thing I knew about this film is exactly the premise, because it's a simple pitch. It's like, what if it's a 6 people and they're just trying to have a freaking meal, trying to eat, which I gotta ask you, I know this is your show, but I gotta ask you, Brian, were you hungry at any point by the end of this thing?
Oh,
like, did you get a little famished? Because like I felt, I was just like, I gotta eat something, because they're not. I got to. You know what I mean?
There are food movies that make you hungry because you're watching them prepare meals, and like a Julie and Julia kind of movie where it's just like all this just amazing food on the screen. But then, or what's that, Big Night with Stanley Tucci? Also Stanley Tucci.
Yeah.
but then this movie makes you hungry for the opposite reason. Because they keep trying to have a meal and they can never get served food.
Yeah, it's the ultimate appetite suppression, this movie. Right?
Like, and that's part of the humor. The humor of the movie is like they're seated and the waiter has like taken their order and walks off, and you're like, okay. And then like, an army
hijinks ensues. Yeah. An army happens. They're on stage.
They're on a stage.
And you're like, what? Or it's a dream.
That came from a dream that Buñuel had, by the way. He's like a distinct dream was like all of a sudden it's revealed that he's on a stage and there are people looking at him and he can't remember his lines. Like, what are my lines? What is this?
And like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? No, it's brilliant. Like, that's one of my favorite scenes in the film, because it's shot like a regular just scene, and then the camera pans out and then you see the audience and you're just like, wait a minute. It's like an ultimate, like, it's a sketch comedy thing. That's what this movie really is. It is sketch comedy. Right. A lot of times. Like, that's what this movie, and it's like, because I think like this is 72, so then like SNL's in like 74, I believe.
70, is it? I think
75 or something like that.
Fall of 75, I want to say.
Yeah, something like that.
It's coming up on 50 years.
So yeah, it's coming up on 50 years. Hey, you're gonna have to do an episode. Bonus episode. Saturday Night Live, talk about all the cast members, every single one. But no, it almost like reminds you of just like a recurring bit. Like, how like on a sketch comedy show they'll have a recurring bit, and with that guest that week they'll bring somebody in, and that's what this movie almost feels like. It's just like a recurring bit, and like the writers that week were like, we're taking the bit to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, and then by the end you're like, you know what, the bit doesn't matter anyway. It's just a whole thing of longing, and they're just walking down an endless road of hunger, and then like suppression, and then like, guilt and sexuality, and all these things are just wrapped in there, and I find I find the movie to be just so darkly funny and yet also very almost cruel, in like a cruel way too, because like the movie is not only doing it to the characters, I think it's doing it to the audience. It is massively playing with the audience. And so that's what I really love about it. It's just like, we're not only screwing with these people and they're not going to eat, we're also screwing with traditional story structure,
right?
And payoff. Like, the movie barely has payoff.
Doesn't really have a payoff.
No, not traditional payoff in the sense, But like that's
they
what I
kind
of really liked about it. Oh, they have soup. Don't get me wrong.
He has bread.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many touches. Like I love how it opens very like a normal movie. Like it seems like, okay, they're going to dinner, and then they go into the restaurant and they're having like a funeral, and that's why there's nobody there.
That's why they're not serving.
We'll seat you. Yeah, we'll seat you. And then they're like looking.
Like, I don't want to eat here.
And then they're like, I don't think I want to eat here while there's a dead body over there.
Well, I love it too. They're like, oh, we got to go. The drug bus is about to go down. You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, where?
Yeah.
Like, that's just like, I guess you can't have a regular meal without like the suspicion that the police are onto you. It's also, I think, like a movie about massive paranoia.
Oh, right.
Mm-hmm. So like, there's a lot of like, so we were supposed to record a little bit earlier for all you folks out there that need to know that. And so like the week that I had time to think about it, you sort of peel the onion and the layers and everything to it. So
yeah.
Or a cake if you're not an onion person. You know what I mean?
Well, from what I read, Buñuel wanted to make a movie about repetition. Like that was the idea. He had made Tristana 2 years before. Have you seen Tristana? It's really good. It's with
really
Catherine Deneuve. It's really great. It's got some surrealistic touches, and it's also kind of darkly funny. It's got kind of more of a relationship, mainly just three people in that movie. But he thought he was starting to repeat himself in the films he was making, and so he wasn't sure if he wanted to make another one after Tristana. And then he thought, well, why don't I make a film about repetition? That's where he got started. And reading about it's crazy when you think about today. It's like they started shooting this movie in May of 1972. It came out in October of 72. I'm like, what? Like you don't really see that very much. I mean, you get the occasional.
What is it? Clint Eastwood?
Clint Eastwood, Steven Spielberg, The Post. Wasn't Steven Spielberg like? I feel like he made like Munich and The Post like in July, August, and they were
it's notorious that like I think it was like there was a lot of digital stuff and work that he had, and like there was a delay I think on Ready Player One.
For Ready Player One, he had time to make it.
And so film. Like he fit a film in between that. It's like, oh, you fit a film with Meryl and Tom Hanks in there. I was just like a Sunday project for you. Like, good for you. It's like, fuck, god damn it.
He can, but I mean, very few directors can make a film and then it's out within like 4 or 5 months. That's pretty fast.
Yeah, like James Cameron takes like 900 years. You know what I mean? Like Martin Scorsese is very well. Some directors are very meticulous,
right?
And down to like the last second, and then others are just like, we doing this? Yeah, it's done. Is it a cake? I don't know. You know, they call it. I mean,
it's like it looked like
it rised. You know what I mean?
It's like I think Spielberg left to shoot Schindler's List without having even done any post on Jurassic Park. Like he just left that to others
because the technology was going to take so long on that damn thing.
Yeah.
And because it was so ahead of its time. But I find that interesting too, that it is interesting, right? When directors sort of start looking back at their own career and they start to examine their place and where they're at and their legacy. I mean, obviously, like, people like, I think, the Coens and Fincher and Quentin Tarantino of modern era, they're the ones right now because they're older and they've done a lot of films and they've been around the industry a while. They start looking back and maybe even going back to familiar territory or whatnot, but then they try to change it up or they're trying to go back and examine things that they have yet examined before. And I find it very interesting that he felt that he was, because Buñuel is a very influential filmmaker and one of those guys where you're like, you think your own work is becoming repetitive and you're like a world-renowned director, like one of the best of your era, and you're like, I don't know, I think I've been phoning it in. Like the self-awareness of that is kind of great, but then it also lends to, I think, one of weirdly his most accessible films. And because it's like, I think this movie is like, it is surrealism, but it's also like extremely funny and very playful, And I can see why it goes on to win an Oscar, because audiences just think, man, that was a weird, fun little time and different than what he's been doing before. And yeah, it's a little bit of a cynical little film, but it's also very tongue in cheek. And yeah, I mean,
yeah, I could see this really like the art house theaters in the fall of 72. I could see this like just being full houses, like people.
Oh yeah.
Oh, very much a word of mouth movie. Like you got to see this thing. It's got a weird title. It's like you got to check it out.
Let me tell you something. That little thing, I smoked a little bit before I got in there, and that thing's a right. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
movie of the year.
Yeah, you want a good time, bro? Just smoke some kush and go and see the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. You know what I'm saying? Like that's exactly what this kind of movie really feels like, because it feels like a fever dream, and and also it's made by a guy who's like in weirdly just like rare form. She's like, holy hell, like he can continue to keep doing this. You know? I think it's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and for someone who was making films in the 20s to still be relevant and still making great stuff in the 70s is really cool. Very few directors did that. I mean, kind of the other one I think of is Alfred Hitchcock, who started making films in 1925. His first film was The Pleasure Garden, and he worked long enough to make an R-rated film in 1972 with Frenzy. And it's so rare for directors to have like that longevity of 50 years and to still be bringing it, right? Tarantino talks about how he doesn't want to make films too long, or they might, not be as good as the first few he made.
I mean, we don't have many directors that are doing that, like left. Like I think Scorsese, Michael Haneke, Spielberg, like we mentioned, Verhoeven, Ridley Scott.
Eastwood just made Clint. Cry Macho was.
I wish he didn't, but it's the different.
His first film as director, Play Misty for Me, was 71, and then Cry Macho was 21. So I'm like, wow, you don't see that very much. Like 50.
No, you don't. It's also kind of like insane. Like you've done 50 years of storytelling. And this is like his third to last film. Boomwell
has, I think, two more after
two more, and like that. Yeah, so it is very much because he passes away in 83. The movie comes out in 72.
That Obscure Object of Desire is his last film, I want to say, from 77. And
correct.
That's a really great film too. I enjoy that one. I don't know if I've seen the one in between. What is it called? Phantom of the Liberty or something?
Yes, and that's one
74. So they'll probably get to that in 70 for 24. Yeah.
Exactly. But no, it is a master at the end of the line saying, hey, all you young kids, all these American new wave, right, of independent cinema, and all these kids that weren't now that are older now, you know what I mean? Hey, I can still go up to the batter's box and I can hit a home run and I can knock it out of the park. And that is always a marvel to me when somebody does that. Like, to think about like him doing this and then like Scorsese making a movie like Wolf of Wall Street, and then the next year making or a couple of years later making Silence. Right. You're like, how in the hell are they doing films with the vigor of a 20-year-old in their like 60s and 70s?
Yeah, Scorsese 80 now, isn't he? 80?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, Ridley Scott just turned 80. He's making a Napoleon epic.
Ridley Scott, I think, is 84 or 85.
Yeah, he's like, and you wouldn't think it because he looks.
Oh yeah,
great. He looks great. Like Michael Mann is turning. He's 79. He's about to be 80. He's doing the Ferrari movie, and then he's talking about like doing all this stuff. I saw this recent interview with him, and I'm like, these guys, the power of cinema are keeping them alive. It's great. I love it. But no, this movie. It's one of those like fountain of youth sort of.
I'm glad he didn't retire after Tristana. Like I think he had a few more things to say. And this movie, I mean, it's not a movie where you're really like super connected to a specific character. It's very much an ensemble. Like we have scenes in the movie where we spend time with just like two people, and man trying to get a woman undressed and she's refusing, and we have scenes of a smaller group, but like it's mostly an ensemble piece where if there, like, there's really no one, I think, from this movie that you could necessarily say, oh, that should have gotten a supporting actor or supporting actress nominated. Like, it's very much like a group film, like, that you don't really see often.
It's
I
a
like
movie
that about
of,
it too.
It's like a vignettes.
Yeah.
But it's connected vignettes. Like, I think of like the colonel and the ambassador, yelling and slapping each other from, the Pugger Miranda. And I'm sitting there just going like, yeah, this, I can't tell you why I love this, but like, I just do because it just works. It's one of those where like, yeah, no one's getting an individual award here other than probably Buñuel himself. Like, it's where you just have these actors and they're doing this work built by in trust of this master filmmaker, sort of just guiding them the way. And I just love it when that happens, because then you really get to see the artist really at work and the meticulousness that is behind all of it too, because it is a tight rope this movie has to, and a tight thread he has to needle through, and I think he really succeeds in it.
Yeah, it's such an original piece with a clear vision by the director. It kind of surprises me, since it did well getting foreign film, that Buñuel did not get a director nomination for this. You'd think he would.
You think he would? I mean,
you got original screenplay nomination. It did.
Yeah. But and that's the thing
but
too.
It's a fierce year.
It was, but then also like the 70s too. They did do the one-off foreign director nominations a hell of a lot more than the 80s and the 90s, and nowadays because we get to do, that's sort of like the great thing about, like, you look back 50 years later and you're like, well, we kind of have some things that are similar. We have some cool out of the box international film. Like, international films nowadays, I think that's where cinema thrives the most.
Oh yeah,
in America, because you're just sitting there and like, no American house is going to make Parasite or Titan, you know what I mean, something like that. Like, Disney Plus presents Titan. That's not gonna happen. And like, no one, so only these places, these houses from across the world could let, and they do for the most part, even still to this day, independent cinema across or foreign cinema across the world, they allow their artists to create their visions, and because they consider it an art, an art form, and there's a respect to those creatives. And so, and I think that that's definitely on case here. It's just like, I'm gonna let this guy cook one last time, because they're probably like, oh, okay, man, you're gonna make a movie about Reputation or whatever, and the last couple ones have been, and then they see it and they go, oh no, it's like that feeling, right? Because you grow up with the director, you watch him for so many years, and then they come back with something and they remind you of, yeah, that's why they're the best.
Oh, so, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many great moments in this movie. I love the scene. I think it's the scene where that guy comes over and talks to them and tells the story. When don't they just order coffee? And
I think the guy,
the guy comes back and he's, well, they ask for both, and the guy comes back and is like, no coffee. Yeah. And they say, well, can we have tea? And he goes, oh yes, okay. And then he walks away. And there's talking, they're like dialogue for 2-3 minutes, and the waiter comes back and says, we're out of tea too, I'm very sorry. And they say, well, is there anything we can order? And he's like, no. And it's like, no. That's when that's like an hour in, 45 to an hour in. That's when like, these people are not going to be served anything.
Yeah. And that's when you're like, I'll take a large pizza and something to drink, please, because I need to eat for them.
But like you put yourself in their shoes. I mean, how many times have we gotten to a restaurant, it's been a long day and we're starving, and just imagine like sitting there and you just never get your food. It's like, it's something that we can all relate to. We've all been there.
Oh yeah. No, where you're just sitting there, like, sitting there for an hour, and you're like, I ordered my food before that table over there. You know what I mean? And so I think it's the thing too. It's like, these people are going through all these things in their lives, and they have everything going on, and yet all they want to do is just sit down and eat a meal. But then, like, when you're sitting down at a table and you're wanting to eat, and it's taking forever, you start just getting like more angry and upset and and uncomfortable and everything. And these people's lives are like falling apart, and it's like whether it's real or not, you become delirious. You know what I mean? And like the whole metaphor is then taken in on the audience. You become, very invested, but you're also like very uncomfortable, and it's very funny, but then it's also, it becomes hysteria. And then through that hysteria becomes the hysterical. And so I think it's just when you watch a comedy and it's really smart and it knows that it's smart and not in a pretentious way, you kind of sit back and go, I'm impressed. Like I and that's what I think that this movie really is.
Yeah, and there's no blinking at the camera. There's no scenes where you feel he's trying to be funny or like land a laugh. Like it's the situations. It gets to a point where you have to laugh at something because it's so absurd. So many of these things, like what, the priest who wants to be a gardener.
Yeah. Oh, and then the priest who wants to be a gardener, but then dresses as a gardener, they don't let him in, but then he puts on the priest outfit and then they let him in. It's like, what? Like, like being paranoid that like you're shooting some sort of object because there's this like maybe terrorist organization after you. And it's like, I laughed. I was laughing at that because it's like, you shot at her. Like, what are you doing? Like, who's the real one there with, any sort of danger? I think the dream jump sequences or whatever, or the twist of like and all that, I think that's hysterical. Like I just think I'm like, okay, like this guy he knows what he's doing. He's making a movie at this point where it's like, what is real, what is not? And have they been meeting in dreams, like in the idea of dreams too, and the idea of your dreams feeling so real that it's like but in dreams, like Brian, I don't know how you are, but like you don't remember eating in your dreams.
No,
you remember like you have conversations, you'll have stories, you'll have wild imaginations, but you never think about like sitting down and just having a meal somewhere. You know what I mean? That's more like a daydream or like a fantasy, but like in an actual dream-like situation, you're not thinking about that.
That's a good point.
You're thinking about all the pressures and maybe even like scenarios that's going to play out for your like life or fantastical things. You never think about like, I'm sitting down and having this giant meal with the people I know. And I think that there's a little bit of that in there. It's like, when do we ever dream about eating? The most basic necessity that we need to do in order to continue to live and live our lives. And so I find, I was thinking about that too as the film was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of this movie you're supposed to take literally, because there's so many parts where you're seeing a scene playing out, and then all of a sudden, like a character wakes up, and you're like, okay.
It reminded me of like
what's actually happening here.
It reminded me of like the end of like the Bob Newhart show, or Newhart or whatever.
Oh, right.
Where it's just like it's all a dream, and it was actually like a dream of his character from the first television show that he ever did.
That's right. That's like the last.
You're
scene.
Like, yeah, and I'm like, did they steal that from this? Like, because like that's what it kind of felt like. They just jolt out of it and then they go on, and you're like, wait, and that uncomfortability is just what makes the movie so great.
And what do you make of the shot that we see often of them walking down this lonely road, the 6, 7 of them, however many there are, and they have determination on their face. They're not just wandering. Like it looks like they're trying to get somewhere. But then we get shots from behind, and they're just like the road goes on to nowhere. So what do you make of that? And that's how the movie ends. Like, what do you make of that shot? Well,
I think it's just like the ever loving quest to what they want.
Right. And never achieving it.
Unattainable goal. It's not like purgatory or anything, but like it's their own personal hell. It's like they're gonna march and determined to get to that meal, damn it. And it's just never gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen.
And because it's a dream. You know what I mean? It's a fictitious fantasy at that point. And they're in their best. Like when you're in your dreams, you want to look your best. They look their best. So therefore they're marching towards this goal. There's no sound. They're not talking. You don't remember anything. But like if you were describing a dream, you'd be like, yeah, we were just walking down this road and We kept going. We were trying to make our 6 o'clock reservation, and we just never got there. We just never got there.
I do wonder if another director with this material would have ended the movie with them sitting around a table and the food comes out, and even over the end credits or something, you see them all stuffing their faces. Like, we don't get that moment of them enjoying a meal. You'd think like that could have been an idea.
Oh, them just like stuffing their face. Like that's the ending. I would have loved that.
I
like
wonder if some they don't they get the food, and then but there's been like some conflict, so nobody eats. They start throwing it at each other. No one actually puts it in the mouth.
Yeah. Oh, that would have even been great.
But I like that you don't get that payoff. I feel like some audience members are probably waiting. Okay, well, at least at the end they'll
it's
eat.
Consistent. Right? It's like consistent with the film. It's like, I'm not going to give you, no, you want this. An audience wants this payoff, and I'm just not going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Because that's not how it works, because you don't know how your dreams end.
Right.
Maybe if you have a recurring dream and you're able to put it together, but then when you wake up, you figure out the ending maybe to it. Like if it's a story you're creating in your head, because you hear creatives all the time, it started off as a dream, but they don't this, you pick your dreams end where you want them to, and they don't have resolution, they don't have concrete, this is how the story wrapped up. And I think that's exactly where it goes, where it's just like, this story ends exactly where all of our dreams and stories usually end, with a place of uncertainty. And also, you're at the hands of a guy just kind of being like, I'm just not going to give it to you, and you don't deserve it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a really special film. I feel like it's quirky enough that it might have been passed over for year-end awards and things. The fact that this got in and won an award of this caliber is pretty cool. And apparently I read in my notes that they were planning to release it, to premiere it at Cannes 1973. And they saw the first cut, like the producer was like, this movie's special, this is really good, I think we should just put this out in a couple months. And that's what they did. So they just brought it out without no festivals, or like they just brought it out. They were like, let's just release it, it's ready, it's done, let's do it. Because I guess he is able to shoot so fast because he really does kind of edit in camera. Like, he doesn't shoot just a master and a 2-shot and this and that and all these, like, Boonwell, especially towards the end, would just kind of like figure it out while they're on the set, like, how do I want to cut this scene, and he would shoot it that way. So I think that's why post-production was really fast on the movie. There wasn't a whole lot of extra shots to deal with, so that helps too.
Oh yeah,
that's when you know what you're doing, when you don't need a lot of extra footage, when you're just like, I know how to cut this.
I know what I'm doing here. Move aside. Yeah.
Not to say that some directors, they just shoot forever, and they shoot the scene from 80 different angles, and then they decide later, and that's the way to do it too.
Exactly.
Yeah. So as we get to our final two segments, or anything else you'd like to say about the movie, anything that we didn't touch on? I just think this is a very special film. I think it's really unique, especially for like this period, the early 70s, directors taking chances, giving us alternative narratives that we haven't seen before. And this is one of Boonwell's just finest works. It's like, it really shows who he was as a storyteller. It's just a lot of fun. If you've never seen it before, it's worth a look.
Oh, it's a hoot. Like, it's just like, it feels like an old man toying with with the audience one last time. And like, he's like, I'm gonna screw you up, kids, and it's funny. It's his direction is just dead on. It's so confident. Like, it really, like, weirdly enough, for as loose as it is, Brian, it's a very confident film because of those years, because of that mileage. I have so much respect for directors when they are doing films later in their careers. And when they are doing something, you can feel confidence. Sometimes that confidence could be a detriment to some directors. Like, the confidence turns to cockiness. But when a director is confident and it's working, it's unlike anything you'll see. Because the kinks are worked out, and all the things, and all the pressures and everything, and they've got they've got answers to the questions that they need to on the fly. So they've learned that. And yeah, and then it can lead to probably when they're shooting and making it and feel very special at the time. And then like, yeah, somebody sees it and goes, holy crap, we've got like this classic on our hands, and we didn't, it's like, what do we do with this thing? We got to release it. People got to see it. So yeah, it's a good movie. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. So they made the right call. It won Best Foreign Film at the Oscars. The other 4 titles I have not seen. The only other one nominated here that I've heard of is called The New Land from Sweden. I feel like I heard of that one. I don't know the other 3. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay. It lost to The Candidate, the Robert Redford movie. Have you seen that one?
I have seen The Candidate.
Yeah, so that won Best Original Screenplay.
Yeah, yeah. The Candidate's really good.
Yeah.
They're both really, like, that's the thing about it. It's like, this gets nominated for screenplay, and you go like,
it's kind of a weird.
That's a weird. That's bold, but good for you. But The Candidate makes sense. Like, Candidate is a really good like political drama, and one of Redford's just one of Redford's best performances.
We talked about that in May, and it's like he's like the whole movie. Like that's talk about just like a star power, charismatic performance.
How the hell he wasn't nominated for Best Actors?
He only got 1 Oscar nomination for Best Actor, and that was for The Sting.
Yeah.
And then he won Best Director for Ordinary People, but this is only acting nomination in his whole career.
Blows my mind. Blows my mind.
He's too attractive.
Yeah.
They couldn't look past the looks.
No shit. Like that's just dumb, because he's probably like one of the top 3 great male actors of his generation, if not the best. Like, I mean, God, stupid. But yes, The Candidate. If you haven't seen that, and if you haven't seen The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, watch them both back to back. See who should have won that screenplay category.
Exactly. The last thing I have to say,
2 polar opposite films.
Last thing about the research I have to mention is in October of 2014, Stephen Sondheim stated that he and playwright David Ives were working on a new musical with a plot inspired by this movie, and they shelved it. They shelved it in 2021. Well, and then he passed away a few months ago.
Damn,
that would have been an interesting musical based on this movie.
That would have been, yeah. Given Sondheim in this kind of ballpark, that would have been interesting.
A lot of scenes of them singing, trying to get their food.
I'm really hungry. I want to eat. Waiter, get over here.
It's been 2 weeks. Where's
into the kitchen?
No. So I had to share. I thought that was interesting. I don't know if they ever got to if they wrote any songs, but
I pray to God that the number one thing I hate is when people die and then they release stuff like if the Prince estate is done. It's like, that's not what he wanted. So like, please, if he does have it shelved and there was music, just leave it alone. Just let it sit there. Just let it sit there. Don't
bring it out and try to try. Let's take what he worked on and like turn it into a show. Like, no, don't do that.
Just leave it. Let it sleep. It's okay.
All right, so that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's the Divine Double Feature. This is where we pick a modern film to pair with it. Like, what's something that's come out in like the last 20 to 25 years that you think would make a good like comparison movie, that if someone finished Discreet Charm, wanted to watch one more movie on a double feature that had something similar, what would you go with?
God,
this was kind of hard. This was kind of a hard one for me.
I thought about a bunch of films, but the one that, when I was doing research and I was trying to think about it, and I was just like, man, it just makes sense, is Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Because that is a movie where the conceit is this is a detective story. Just like this movie is a conceit of just a regular dinner amongst friends.
Right.
But you go down so many damn avenues in Inherent Vice. And I love the film, to be honest with you. I know many people don't. It's a very divisive film. But no, I can see that. I can see it already there. But you go down so many twists and turns, and the comedy's so dark, and you get confused, and you get in that haze. And I think that that's what it's like. The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie in Inherent Vice does. You get kind of swept up to the point in which you're just like, you give yourself over to the director. You just kind of give yourself over to somebody that's just like, making a movie at that point. And there's a lot of funny bits. There's a lot of confusion. And I just think like that's for me, because like I thought of like a bunch of other ones, but they're more on the drama side. And I also think too, the qualifier is you're watching a comedy here. And I think Inherent Vice for me is a really funny film without medicinal uses of any kind. Like it's just, I think it's a very funny sort of, you know, silly, wild film. So yeah, that's what I kind of thought. And it's in the sort of closest thing to surrealist for, you know, our age as well. So like, that's where I was like, yeah, that movie kind of makes sense because it's, you have a consistent character, but yet it's all these vignettes and all these like weird sort of stoppages too. So
yeah, and the surrealism kind of comes through the events of the movie, not so much like the style of it, like going crazy there. So that's a great idea. So I need to give that one another watch. I might have had a tough time with that one.
You know what is so funny is that when I took my wife to see The Master, she hated it. And I thought, well, and I love The Master. And so when we saw Inherent Vice, I thought, oh God, I'm reading all the reviews, very divisive, you know, blah, 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 blah. And she couldn't stop laughing when she was watching it. And I was cool. Like, what's going on here? I thought it would be the inverse. You know what I mean? And so I think it's a movie too that like as time goes on, rewatches help that movie.
Okay.
Because you didn't know what to expect going into it. And then now it's sort of like, okay, I'm following along better. And like, if you want to follow the murder mystery, you can, but it's not it really isn't even important. You don't even remember it, to be honest with you. You just remember the time you're spending with Doc Sportello. And I think like with this too, you don't remember half the reasons or whys or this or that or the, you know, the sort of logistics of these 6 people. You just remember them going and doing all these crazy things that then end up in these wacky scenarios. And you're just following them. And then by the end, you're like, why do I need to find any reason other than like, it's a funny film, you know?
I remember I loved Martin Short in that movie. That's my movie.
Oh God. I love Josh Brolin in that movie.
Okay.
Because he's eating the frozen banana and then he comes in and kicks down the door and just eats all the marijuana, and then he just leaves. And it's just like, what? Like, what just happened here? Like, yeah. So
yeah, that's a good choice. I went with Amélie. I thought like a surrealistic kind of French kind of comedy fantasy movie would be an interesting direction in terms of like, it's about 30 years later, 29 years later. Yeah. And to see like another kind of visionary director and, you know, in a with some similar vibes, a little bit more, obviously a little bit higher budget, and there's more you know, CGI and things like that, and style for sure. But I think it has some of the same tone and the same kind of surrealistic elements. I think it would make kind of an interesting double feature. And that's a movie that I loved when I was younger, and I have not seen it in forever, and I want to watch it again.
Oh no, I haven't seen that film in like maybe
it's been probably 10 years for me.
15 years. Yeah. And I remember really liking it, but I have like never just had the itch to go back. But I know that you're talking about it's 30 years old, right? It's like it came out in
it's 20 years? 30 years after Discreet Charm. So it came out in 01.
It came out in 01. Yeah. So I know that I think it's next year or the year, because I know at InSession Film we do the retrospectives. And I think this year they're doing 2002, but next year they do 2001, the year 2001, not the film. And and so that'll be up on the review docket to go back and re-examine that, and that'll be kind of interesting to see that one. So I'll probably try to see it beforehand, but yeah, I kind of would want to see it now since it's more, because we just talked about it. So yeah,
so it's great titles there to check out after Discreet Charm. I feel like Discreet Charm kind of ends on a note, like it doesn't end in a way that makes you, you know, entirely satisfied in terms of like, you know, an ending that you're like, oh, it's like, I feel like
you're not walking out on a high.
It ends in a way that it kind of deserves a second film of the night to like, kind of whet your palate, like to give you a taste of something a little bit different, but also something that, even if it's more modern, gives you something that's similar to the tone of Discreet Charm. I think would be really fun.
No, yeah, for sure.
All right, our final segment, Beyond the Flick. I thought we talked about surrealism in film. So what are some other films that you love that kind of deal with surrealism, that whether it's just a segment from the movie or the movie as a whole, where there's just an element to it, dreamlike? You know, David Lynch is one of my favorites of all time. So I could just list his movies and call it a day. I do have a couple other titles.
Yeah.
You're a Lynch fan?
I
He's
love
one of my 5 favorites of all time.
Like at InSession Film, we do the movie series over at Extra Film,
right,
the podcast that I do with Jay Ledbetter. And I was such a baby for such a long time because I just thought like, oh, David Lynch is going to be just the weirdest dude and like give me nightmares and do a bunch of dumb shit. And so like last year, I just conquered my fear and I finally watched all his films. And he's like one of the best directors ever. I was like watching his movies every week and I was just like, okay, I'm an idiot. 1 and 2, don't know how I got this in my head, because it was just like, you know, you get in your head of just the fact that like when you think about surrealism film, oh, it's gonna be weird and it's gonna be out there and it's gonna be different.
Yeah,
you know, and you're just like, no, I just want something normal. And it's like, no, it's actually quite the opposite. It's very thought-provoking and very enriching for your cinematic palette. So watching Lynch, I mean, like obviously like Mulholland Drive and Blue Velvet, they're fantastic films. The one that I can't stop thinking about, and they're just recently, I think, announced like they have a 4K restoration and they're gonna release it and everything, is Lost Highway.
Oh,
like
right.
that is a movie that I think about. That's a movie too where you could have partnered it with the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, because that movie you feel like you don't get an actual like finality for either side of the story, right? And it's so dark and it's so weird and it's so cool and just he's trying to connect all these things, and does it work or not? No. And that's what I love about Twin Peaks is also too, is just like it is this thing where you're like, it's a simple murder mystery, but of course it can't be that simple because it's David Lynch.
Yeah.
And so it takes it down these fantastical horror sci-fi elements to it that just are awesome. And then I mean, like, you know, I think also too, somebody like, I'm not a big fan of his, but when I think of surrealism too in the modern sense, I think of like Terry Gilliam and like Brazil, and I think of 8.5, and you know, for the most modern person, when I think about surrealism, is Charlie Kaufman. And I think about, you know, his script for like Being John Malkovich. And I think about, his filmography. I think of Synecdoche, New York. I remember watching that in the theater and not knowing what the hell that movie was about at the time. And now I'm just like, that movie is impeccable, because then like I'm thinking of Ending Things came out 2 years ago. And that's a movie that like people were like, I don't like this. And I remember going like, this movie rules. Because like it's so specific and yet also very meta. Like I think also that's the thing about surrealism. It's very meta. It's like the director is saying something also completely about themselves in most of these projects, and they're can lend to be the most personal films in someone's filmography if they're not purely of the surrealism genre. So I would say that those are like some that I think about.
Yeah, I mean, I have those directors too on my top 3. I I mean, I could pick probably 3 of 20, and any of those could be on here. But when I think of surreal, I think of Eternal Sunshine, The Spotless Mind. It's just one of my favorites. I saw it in college, and it's always stuck with me, and I revisit it every few years. And you know, I made a video about Jim Carrey and talked about how, I mean, he's great in Truman Show and Man on the Moon, but like his performance in Eternal Sunshine is just divine. I just love him in that, and I wish he'd gotten more attention for it. And just a beautiful film, great ensemble. And I don't know, I mean, I love Being John Malkovich too, but it's like almost like a different kind of movie. I've never decided which one I like more. They're both great.
Oh no.
And Adaptation is amazing too.
Oh, Adaptation's fantastic. Also, I love Altman's surrealism films. Like I think Images.
Oh,
have you ever seen Images?
I just added that to the list for Film at 50 at the end of the year.
that movie.
I did one movie to slot in, and I'm like, okay, is it a horror film?
Yeah,
it is. Okay.
Yeah, but it's also it's batshit insane. Like,
okay,
that movie,
I'm excited.
And it's but then also too, like, Three Women is another one.
That's my favorite film of his.
I'm obsessed with that film. I'm obsessed with Shelley Duvall in that film. I'm just like, and that ending makes absolutely
Shelley Duvall. I love her.
And that ending and just what it all means, and that, yeah, those are the ones where you just sit there and you go like, these SOBs know what they're doing. Yeah. I don't know how. I can't, like, that's the thing, is to crack Charlie Kaufman, Michel Gondry's sort of mind when they're making movies, or these giants that we've mentioned, like a David Lynch. Like, David Lynch seems like the nicest person on the planet.
Yeah,
he's doing weather updates, and if you
love his weather updates.
He's in like the Fablemans later this year. It's like, it's a
voiceover role.
Yeah, I think so. If he doesn't play the weatherman, like, what are we doing? But like, yet he makes some of the most peculiar, interesting stuff. Like, God, what was the last movie? God, what's the one movie?
I was so mad when they announced for 2 days that he had a movie going to Cannes.
I know, I was freaking out. What's the one?
Like, someone said it was happening, and I went, "Oh my god!" And that didn't.
I'm trying to think about the one movie that he did.
That... he only has like 10 films, so I can just name them off. If you
yeah, it's the last technically film that he.
Oh, Inland Empire.
Inland Empire. Okay, yes, exactly. Like, that movie. What is that movie? Like, is it?
Bizarre.
Like, it is so bizarre. It's so crazy, and yet
it looks cruddy too.
It looks so cruddy, and yet people love it. You know what I mean? It's like, they're like, we stand Inland Empire. We want the 4K, and I sit there and I go, even I have limits. So, like, it depends on it. But man, if this sort of style hits, man, they'll become your favorite films.
Yeah, I mean, if surrealism is being handled in a way where that's what the movie is, there's no story, there's no characters you care about, then I don't. That's like, when style over substance, I'm like out like pretty quickly. But that's what I love about Lynch's work, is that he really does take seriously his story and the characters, and it never feels like he's just manipulating you. It feels like he's trying to say something. It doesn't feel like he's just like making it up on the spot. And even in Mulholland Drive, which he did shoot as a pilot for a show, and then had to sit there and be like, oh, okay, I have to, someone's financing from France, giving me the money to finish this as a film. And he had to sit there and he had no idea. So in that respect, he had to kind of like figure it out. But when you watch that movie, it doesn't feel like he's just grabbing things and throwing them at you with no purpose.
And also too, he's doing it, but then, like you said, like, he has an answer,
right?
But he ain't gonna tell you what it is. Yeah, and I love that, because I think directors, especially, a lot of American directors, and I love American directors, but god damn it, they overshare.
Oh, right, telling us too much.
Like, if you have an ambiguous film, even like, it's not even just an American director. Like, this is like a Chris Nolan sort of problem too, or like many directors nowadays, they want to tell you everything. They want to tell you what your film is. Like, that's what I sort of liked. I like a little bit about, like, Jordan Peele, is like, he'll tell you what the theme was, but he's not going to tell you what the meaning to everything in his film is.
Right.
And you have to kind of put those pieces together. And that's the old school way of thinking. It's just like, you tell me what you feel rather than me telling you everything.
Right. It's way more interesting.
Audiences want everything handed to them. And it's like, no, these directors are like, no, the cinema is supposed to be for you to find your answers to what this is. It's like the movie theater experience is supposed to be, in a lot of ways, is in many ways actually cathartic and therapeutic. So for you to come out of a movie, you need to have that feeling of, maybe I don't know what it is, and I need to talk to people about it, and that's okay. Like, not knowing is kind of great, because you're like, what did I just watch? Let me go read about it. Let me write about it. Let me talk about it on a podcast. Let me have a dinner with people,
right,
and it's called having an experience. That's basically what
the people who are looking for answers would not enjoy Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie.
God damn it. Like that, ain't that the truth? Like, ain't that the truth? It's
They'll put on the gray man instead.
That was my heart breaking as Brian said that. I don't know if you heard that, audience, but it was very, very hurtful what he just said.
That's on your top 10 list?
Hell no. I haven't actually, to be honest, I haven't even seen it. I haven't even seen it yet. And I'm not drunk enough, nor no one paid me enough to do it. So not gonna happen.
Ryan Gosling is nice to look at.
Well, he's always nice to look at. Like, come on. Like,
that's my review of that film.
My
review for InSession Film would have been very short.
Ryan Gosling looks pretty. Grade F.
So I would also throw in a Requiem for a Dream. That's one of my favorite films. I really love Requiem for a Dream. And then the three key films for me for David Lynch, and those are Eraserhead, Blue Velvet, and Mulholland Drive. Those are the three for. I love all of his work except for Dune. I love everything else.
Yeah, Dune's bad.
But the three that I just take with me, and that I taught a course a few years back where we looked at 3 David Lynch movies, and I showed college students Eraserhead and Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive, and it was such a thrilling few weeks. It was to really dig into these movies and analyze them and talk about them, and know that there aren't any answers. You have to kind of come to your own.
But didn't they lead to great discussions?
Oh yeah. Oh, they were the best discussions I've ever had with a group of
right. Like Wild at Heart is another one too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, that movie is wild.
Diane Ladd in that movie is on another level.
My God, so great that she got that Oscar nomination too. Like, thank you for appreciating this wackadoo performance.
I love that. I love when they reward, kind of a wacky, kind of offbeat performance that. Might get into some other festival awards and things, but maybe not the Oscar. I love when they go with like a Diane Ladd and Wild at Heart. Yeah,
when they take like a chance and then it's like something cool, as opposed to being something safe.
Yeah, those age well.
Yeah, they do.
All right, so that takes us to the end here, Ryan. This has been so much fun to talk Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to tell us where we can find you online. Anything you'd like to promote, now would be the time.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find deep breath, everyone. You can find my work over at Awards Watch, where I'm the executive editor over there. You can find my work over at InSession Film, where I'm the managing editor over there. You can find also my work at The Playlist and Film Speak. And I have 2 podcasts that I do regularly. And one is over at Awards Watch. We do a weekly show over there where we're talking about the latest news. We'll play games. We have listener questions. We'll do even maybe movie reviews, film drafts, top 10, top 3, top 5 lists, whatever. We do a lot of stuff over there to try to give like a really fun and different sort of weekly Oscar show that usually happens. And I know that we're gearing up towards the Oscar season. So that's the Awards Watch podcast, and that releases every Monday. And then the other podcast I do is the Extra Film podcast over at InSession Film, where we do, in the front half of the episode, we do movie series, a director movie series. And then in the back half of the episode, we'll do like a independent or art house film review. We are right now currently doing a James Cameron movie series, despite my disdain for the man. We've done the exercise of that, and it's very soon wrap up. And then we will be having a guest come in because my co-host Jay Ledbetter just had his baby.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And so we will have a guest host to come in that will be announced soon, and we will be announcing a new movie series for about a couple of months, and that'll be really fun, and we'll have that announcement very soon. So look for that over on Twitter at InSession Film.
Cool. And you did
Everybody
David Lynch,
now.
Right?
What? Yes, we did do David Lynch. Yeah, we did do Lynch. That was last year in 2021. And you can find all those episodes at InSession Film, and you just find the podcast tab and go to Extra Film. And then there will be like or you can go to movie series and find David Lynch and just click on that, and all the episodes are right there. And those were a lot of fun because it was like me discovering a madman.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not overwhelming. He doesn't have 37 films. It's like 10 movies.
Which is well, and it's also crazy too, is like The Straight Story, right?
Great movie. Straight
That
Story.
movie is like, you would think, oh, what a palate cleanser. And I'm sitting there going like, actually, because you're watching all these other films like that, you're like, actually not like the biggest fan of this. Like, it's a weird outlier. It's not a bad movie or anything, but you're just kind of like, what the hell happened here?
It's so interesting. It's so interesting that he made that. You can still feel him in that movie though, which I think.
Oh, you can, but it's like his outliers are so interesting, like that, or like Dune, or The Elephant Man.
Elephant Man's a little bit more traditional, but
like,
still
that's
really
like,
riveting.
The fact that like Mel Brooks watched Eraserhead in the theater and thought, this is the guy I want to direct The Elephant Man. Just that's the kind of thinking back then, folks. It's great. I love it.
I love it too. Yeah. So this was a lot of fun. Thanks for being here, Ryan. And thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, for all sorts of videos on Oscar history. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.